The wind howled through the open fields, carrying dust and the distant sound of chaos. A crowd had gathered near a worn-out stable, their voices a mixture of concern and fear. In the center of the commotion, a massive, wild stallion thrashed violently against the ropes binding him. His eyes were wide, filled with raw terror and rage, his dark coat matted with dirt and dried sweat. Every attempt to calm him only seemed to make things worse. The stable hands struggled to keep control, their grip tightening on the ropes. Someone shouted, "He's too dangerous. We can't handle him." Another voice, louder and firmer, cut through the noise. "Put him down before he hurts someone." A girl in a wheelchair sat at the edge of the scene, watching everything unfold with silent intensity. Her fingers curled around the metal rims of her chair, but she didn't move, didn't flinch, as if frozen in place. Unlike the others, she wasn't afraid of the horse. She wasn't looking at his power, his aggression, or the threat he posed. She was looking at his pain. No one saw it, but she did. The stallion reared up again, hooves slamming into the ground with earth-shaking force. The crowd took a step back. But the girl? She leaned forward. There was something about the horse that called to her, something familiar in the way his body trembled, the way his muscles fought against forces he didn't understand. The way he refused to surrender, even when the world had given up on him. The girl knew that feeling. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know why, but she felt an unshakable pull toward the creature that everyone else wanted to destroy. And then, it happened. For a brief second, the horse's wild eyes locked onto hers. Time slowed. The rage, the fight, the struggle, it all faded in that moment. The animal's nostrils flared, and his massive body stilled, as if something unspoken had passed between them. The crowd didn't notice, too busy arguing about the stallion's fate. But she saw it. She felt it. Her fingers twitched. A shiver ran through her spine. She had to do something. Ignoring the protests around her, she rolled her wheelchair forward. The uneven ground made it difficult, but she pressed on. Every instinct told her this was crazy, that getting near a wild, unpredictable animal in her condition was reckless, maybe even suicidal. But something deep inside whispered, "Trust him." The moment she moved closer, the stallion flinched, his head snapping in her direction. The rope strained again. A stable hand shouted, "Get back. He'll kill you." But she didn't stop. She didn't speak. She didn't extend her hand. She simply looked at him. The horse froze. The voices around them faded. The chaos stilled. Then, against all logic, all reason, the stallion stopped fighting. He stood motionless, his breathing heavy, eyes locked on hers. The tension in his muscles eased, just slightly. It was as if he saw something in her that no one else did. The girl slowly reached out her hand, not to touch him, just to let him see her. A moment of silence. Then, in the softest motion, the massive stallion took a step toward her. The crowd gasped. But before anyone could react, before she could even process what had just happened, someone grabbed the ropes and yanked hard. The stallion screamed in rage, rearing back. The moment shattered. The horse fought violently again, eyes wide with terror. The connection, gone. A man's voice rang out. "That's it. Enough of this nonsense. Get rid of him before someone gets hurt." The girl's chest tightened. No. They didn't see what she saw. They didn't feel what she felt. She turned her gaze back to the terrified horse, whose entire body now trembled, not from rage, but from fear. She had one chance. One chance to save him. And she wouldn't let them take it away. Hook ends. The girl could barely sleep that night. The image of the wild horse, standing under the cold moonlight, haunted her thoughts. It wasn't just the scars that had caught her attention, it was the way the horse had looked at her. It wasn't like the fearful glances of lost animals or the aggressive stares of untamed beasts. It was something else. The next morning, while the village remained quiet, she wheeled herself back toward the barn. The path was rough, filled with patches of dirt and gravel, making it hard for her wheels to roll smoothly. But she didn't care. She had to see it again. As she approached, she saw the horse standing there, just as before. The air was still, and for a moment, she felt like the world had stopped moving. She hesitated, gripping the wheels of her chair. "Hey there," she whispered softly. The horse's ears twitched. It turned its head ever so slightly, as if recognizing her voice. But it didn't move closer. It just watched. She swallowed hard and reached into her bag, pulling out an apple she had taken from the kitchen. Slowly, she stretched out her hand. The horse didn't react at first. But after a long moment, it took a slow, careful step forward. Then another. Her heart pounded in her chest. As it got closer, she could finally see it clearly, the strange markings on its body. Deep scars ran along its back and sides, but there was something odd about them. They weren't just random injuries. The patterns looked deliberate, almost like they had been placed there for a reason. The horse stopped just a foot away from her. She held her breath. Then, in a moment she would never forget, the horse lowered its head and gently took the apple from her hand. She exhaled shakily, a wave of relief washing over her. "There you go," she murmured. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of control. It was a feeling she had lost long ago when she had been confined to her wheelchair. But here, with this strange, wounded horse in front of her, she didn't feel weak. She felt connected. The village's fear over the next few days, the girl visited the horse in secret, bringing it food and water. Every day, it let her get closer. Every day, it seemed to trust her more. But the village had other opinions. "They say that horse is dangerous," she overheard two men talking outside a shop. "It wasn't supposed to survive that storm." "I heard it's got a disease," another added. "We should put it down before it spreads to the other animals." The girl's stomach twisted. They were afraid of it. That night, she heard her parents talking. "The villagers want to get rid of it," her father said in a hushed tone. "It's not safe. No one knows where it came from." Her mother sighed. "Maybe it's for the best." Her hands clenched into fists. No. They couldn't do this. That horse wasn't dangerous. It was alone. Lost. Just like her. She had to do something. A sign of something more. The next morning, she hurried back to the barn. The horse was already waiting for her. As she rolled closer, she noticed something strange. The scars on its body, they were healing. Not just healing, but healing too fast. She had seen them up close just days ago, deep wounds that looked like they had been burned into its skin. But now, they were fading, as if they had been there for years, not days. She frowned, reaching out a hand. The horse didn't flinch. As her fingers brushed its side, a strange warmth pulsed beneath its coat. A warmth that wasn't normal. And then, it happened. A sudden, blinding pain shot through her legs. She gasped, gripping the armrests of her chair. Her legs felt strange. Tears burned her eyes. It wasn't just pain. It was something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Feeling. She could feel her legs. The sensation vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her breathless. She looked at the horse, heart hammering in her chest. It was watching her again, those glowing eyes filled with something beyond comprehension. Terror and hope warred inside her. This horse, it wasn't normal. And whatever it was, it had just changed everything. The wheelchair rolled to a quiet stop just outside the wooden fence of the old farm. The girl sat still, her fingers gripping the metal armrests as she stared at the massive creature grazing lazily inside the enclosure. The horse was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its coat was dark, yet it shimmered as if it held light beneath the surface. Even from a distance, something about it made her feel different. The elderly man tending to the farm paused when he noticed her. He had seen that look before, the same wonder in the eyes of someone who longed for something just beyond reach. Slowly, he wiped his hands on his worn-out overalls and walked toward her. "Never seen a horse up close?" he asked gently. The girl's eyes didn't leave the creature. "Not like this," she admitted. "He feels different." The man studied her for a moment before glancing at the horse. "You're not wrong," he murmured. She took a breath and pushed her wheelchair slightly forward. The gravel crunched beneath the wheels as she hesitated near the wooden railing. Her heart pounded. What was she even doing here? Just then, the horse lifted its head. Its large, dark eyes locked onto hers. The girl felt something inside her shift. She had always been ignored, pitted, or treated as fragile. But the way this horse was looking at her, it wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, without warning, the horse took a step forward. The girl's breath hitched. The old man stiffened. The horse had never done this before. Slowly, carefully, the massive animal approached the fence, lowering its head just inches away from the girl's outstretched hand. She hesitated, then reached forward. The second her fingers touched its mane, a warmth spread through her body. It was like touching something alive, not just warm, but pulsing with energy. A faint tingling sensation traveled up her arm and down her spine, settling in the muscles of her useless legs. She gasped and yanked her hand away. The old man noticed. "You all right?" he asked, concern flickering in his gaze. The girl didn't know how to explain what she had just felt. It wasn't pain, but it was something. Something real. "Yeah," she muttered. It felt weird." The horse watched her, unblinking. It seemed to understand. The old man scratched his chin. "He's never come this close to anyone before," he admitted. "Even with me, it took weeks before he trusted me enough to let me touch him." The girl's heart pounded in her chest. Why her? She swallowed hard, staring at the creature. "Can I come back?" The old man smiled slightly. "He seems to want you here." "I wouldn't say no." A wave of joy filled her, but she didn't understand why. It wasn't just excitement, it was something deeper. Like a missing piece of her life had suddenly been found. As she turned her wheelchair away, she felt something she hadn't in years, a strange, tingling sensation in her toes. She dismissed it as her imagination. But the horse watched her go, his dark eyes knowing something she didn't. And in the shadows, someone else was watching too. The girl's hands trembled as she held the bridle, her heart pounding against her ribs. The air between them felt thick with unspoken understanding. The stallion, though still tense, did not rear up or pull away. He watched her, waiting, uncertain. The trainers had long since given up on trying to tame him. A horse like that? Untrainable. Dangerous, they had said. But she knew they were wrong. She could feel it deep in her bones. The same way she had felt her legs before the accident, a part of her that still existed, even if no one else believed it. Every morning, before anyone else was awake, she wheeled herself toward the stables. The first few days, the stallion had snorted and stomped, warning her to stay back. But she didn't. She sat there, silent, watching him, waiting for him to trust her first. And then, it happened. One morning, as the sun broke over the hills, the stallion took one step closer to her. Then another. The world around them was silent. The morning mist curled around his legs as he lowered his head just slightly. For the first time, she reached out her hand. She expected him to bolt, to rear up, to reject her. Instead, he let her touch him. Her fingers brushed against his rough coat, feeling the deep scars that marred his body. Marks of a past he could never tell her about. But she didn't need words to understand, they had both been broken by the world, left behind, forgotten. And in that moment, she made a decision. She would train him herself. Not with force. Not with whips or chains. With trust. Days turned into weeks. She studied everything she could about horse training, but deep down, she knew no book could teach her what she already felt. She spoke to him in whispers, never demanding, never forcing. Instead of grabbing a lead rope, she let him choose to follow her. Instead of trying to break his will, she let him know she was on his side. The other trainers mocked her. This is ridiculous. She can't even stand, how does she think she'll ride him? She's wasting her time. She ignored them all. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of fire and gold, she wheeled herself toward the stall. The stallion was waiting for her. She held out her hand, but this time, she didn't just touch him. This time, he lowered his head completely, a silent surrender, an unspoken acceptance. Tears burned in her eyes. She reached for the reins, expecting resistance. Instead, the horse took a deep breath and stepped forward, allowing her to slip them over his head. It was the first time anyone had been able to do it. She swallowed hard. This was real. He was letting her lead him. But just as her heart swelled with victory, a voice behind her shattered the moment. Enough of this nonsense. We're selling him. A cold chill ran through her. She turned sharply, her knuckles turning white on the armrest of her wheelchair. No, she said firmly. The stable master folded his arms. He's dangerous, eh? Her chest tightened. 3 days. 3 days to change everything. She turned back to the stallion. His ears flicked, sensing her distress. He trusted her now. But trust wouldn't be enough. She had to prove them wrong. She had to ride him. Her heart pounded at the thought. The idea seemed impossible. She hadn't been on a horse since before the accident. Her legs were useless now. But her spirit? That still burned. She reached up, her hand gripping the stallion's thick mane. He stood still, unmoving, waiting. She took a deep breath. 3 days. She was going to do the impossible. She was going to ride him. And she was going to show them all that they were wrong. The village was no longer quiet. Word had spread. People whispered in hushed voices about the strange horse that had arrived out of nowhere. Some claimed it was a bad omen, a creature cursed by the storm. Others said it was unnatural, something that shouldn't have survived. But the girl knew the truth. It wasn't just a horse. It had healed faster than anything she had ever seen. It had changed her, even if for just a moment. And now, they were coming for it. The hunters arrived. She was in her room when she heard the voices. We need to handle this before it's too late. A group of men had gathered outside her house, speaking in low, urgent tones. Through the window, she could see their faces, tight with fear, with suspicion. They say it's dangerous, one of them muttered. That girl has been getting too close to it, another added. It's not safe for her. Her heart pounded. They were going after the horse. She gripped the wheels of her chair, forcing herself to stay calm. She had to act fast. Slipping out the back door, she hurried toward the barn, her breath coming in quick gasps. The night air was thick with tension, the silence heavy, as if the world itself knew what was coming. When she reached the barn, the horse was already alert, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. It knew something was wrong. "They're coming," she whispered. The horse let out a low, deep sound, something almost human-like in its sadness. She could see it in its eyes. It trusted her. And she wasn't going to let it down. Footsteps. Voices. The villagers were close. She had seconds to decide. There was only one choice. The escape. "Come on," she whispered urgently, pulling on the horse's reins. "We have to go. Now." The horse hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. Her arms trembled as she gripped the leather straps. She knew she couldn't run. She couldn't even walk. But something deep inside her told her this horse wouldn't leave her behind. And she was right. In one swift motion, the horse lowered its head toward her. Its massive body moved closer, almost as if it was inviting her to climb. Her breath hitched. Was it possible? Could she? Her hands shook as she reached forward. Using every ounce of strength, she pulled herself onto the horse's back. Her body was weak, her legs useless, but the horse stood still, waiting for her. As soon as she was settled, the voices grew louder. "There," someone shouted. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing right on them. "There's no time," she whispered. And then, it happened. The horse moved. But it wasn't just running. It was too fast. Too smooth. As if its hooves weren't just touching the ground, but gliding. The air around them shifted. The girl's breath caught in her throat as she felt something strange, a tingling sensation running through her legs, through her entire body. The horse ran faster, the wind whipping past them, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, she felt free. Behind them, the voices faded. The barn, the village, the torches, everything was gone. Only darkness remained. Only silence. Until, finally, the horse slowed. She blinked, adjusting to the dim light. They were far from the village now, deep in the trees where no one could find them. She took a shaky breath. The horse had saved her. But now, she had to ask herself the question she had been avoiding all along. What exactly was it? And why did it choose her? The night air was thick with tension. The old man paced the barn, gripping the worn leather reins in his hands, his mind racing with possibilities. The girl sat nearby, the strange warmth still lingering in her legs, an unfamiliar sensation creeping up her spine. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the wooden beams. But beneath the natural sounds of the night, there was something else, movement. The old man stiffened. His ears, trained over years of solitude, caught the soft crunch of boots against gravel. They had come. A single beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the far end of the farm. Then another. Shadows moved between the trees, creeping closer, silent, methodical. The girl gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her heart pounding. "They're here," she whispered. The horse snorted loudly, shifting restlessly. The old man didn't have to look twice to know, the animal sensed the danger. With a deep breath, he turned to the girl. "We have to go. Now." She looked up at him, fear and confusion in her eyes. "Go where?" "Anywhere but here," he said. "They won't stop until they have him." The girl swallowed hard and reached for her wheels, but before she could push forward, the horse moved closer to her. It wasn't just looking at her anymore, it was waiting. The old man hesitated. "No, there's no way," but the horse lowered itself just enough, its muscles tensing as if preparing for something. The girl understood. It wanted her to get on. Her breath caught in her throat. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but never in reality, not in a way that was possible. Her hands trembled as she reached forward, gripping the thick mane. "I can't," she whispered. The old man bent down, his voice urgent. You have to try. She hesitated for only a second. Then, with all the strength she had, she pushed herself up. The horse didn't flinch. She expected to feel weak. She expected to fall. But the second she landed on its back, something rushed through her, a force so powerful, it left her breathless. Her legs burned, not in pain, but in something else. She gasped. Her body felt lighter. Stronger. The horse reared back, muscles coiling like a spring, ready to explode into motion. And then, a gunshot rang through the night. The old man spun around, his heart seizing. The figures in the dark were closer now, their weapons raised. The girl's hands tightened around the horse's mane. For the first time in years, she felt power in her legs. And when the horse bolted forward, she held on, like she had done this all her life. The wind lashed against her face as they tore through the field, the sound of boots and barking orders fading behind them. The old man sprinted after them, breathless but determined. Another shot. The horse jerked to the side, narrowly avoiding the bullet. The girl clenched her teeth. Something inside her refused to be afraid. And for the first time since she had lost the ability to walk, she felt unstoppable. The wind howled through the open fields as the girl sat atop the stallion, her hands gripping the reins tightly. The world around her blurred, the pounding of hooves beneath her sending vibrations through her very core. The impossible had already happened, she was riding again. But now, they were running out of time. The stable master had made his decision. By the end of the day, the stallion would be taken away, sold to a buyer who saw him as nothing more than a dangerous beast. The girl refused to let that happen. As she rode across the field, she could feel the stallion responding to her movements, not through force, not through fear, but through an unspoken understanding. He could sense her determination. He could feel that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. She tightened her grip, leaned forward, and whispered, "One last chance." And the stallion understood. As the stable workers and buyers gathered near the fences, murmuring in doubt, the stable master stepped forward. "This isn't up for discussion," he said firmly. "The horse is being sold." The girl refused to back down. "Just one test," she said. "One chance to prove you're wrong." The stable master sighed, arms crossed. "You don't even have full control over him." "You can't even," the stallion snorted loudly, stomping his hoof. It wasn't defiance. It was confidence. The crowd went silent. A challenge had been issued. "Fine," the stable master said after a long pause. "You want to prove something? Show us. Right now." The tension in the air was suffocating as she guided the stallion toward the center of the field. The challenge was simple: could she control him without force? Could she get him to obey without a whip, without fear, without pain? The answer was already clear to her. But she had to make them see it, too. She released the reins slightly, giving the stallion space. She trusted him. And in return, he trusted her back. She gave the lightest nudge with her hands, and the stallion began to move, not with hesitation, not with resistance, but with power and grace. Gasps rose from the crowd. She led him through a series of precise movements, turning, halting, backing up, all without a single sign of aggression. Every movement was perfect, as if horse and rider had become one. By the time they reached the end of the field, the girl could feel the shift in the air. The disbelief. The shock. The realization that everything they had assumed about this horse, about her, was wrong. The stable master took a slow step forward. "He listens to her," someone murmured. "He's not wild at all," another voice whispered. The buyer, a heavy-set man in a dark coat, scoffed. "So what? She got him to move a little. That doesn't mean he's not dangerous." The girl heard his words, but she wasn't finished. She took a deep breath and let go of the reins entirely. A wave of gasps spread through the crowd. But the stallion? He didn't bolt. He didn't panic. He stood perfectly still, waiting for her next command. The girl slowly lifted her hand and made a gentle motion. And the stallion bowed his head. The silence that followed was deafening. The stable master's face paled. The buyer muttered, "That's impossible." The girl lifted her chin, her voice unwavering. "If you take him away, you're making the worst mistake of your life." A long silence followed. Then, the stable master exhaled. "Take the money," the buyer insisted. The stable master hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. "You saw it yourself," the girl continued, her voice carrying strength she hadn't known she had. "He's not a monster. He's not dangerous. He just needed someone to believe in him." She reached forward, stroking the stallion's mane. "He saved me," she said, voice softer now. "Now it's my turn to save him." The stable master turned to look at the buyer. Then back at the girl. A long pause. Then, "Take him back to the stables," he ordered. The crowd gasped. The buyer's face turned red with anger. "You're making a mistake. That's good money." But the stable master shook his head. "I was wrong," he said, watching the girl and the stallion. "That horse doesn't belong to us." A pause. "He belongs to her." The wind howled through the valley, carrying whispers of fate and finality. The girl clung to the horse's mane, her fingers tangled in the thick strands as they rode through the darkness. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from something far deeper. She knew this was the end. The chase had lasted long enough. The hunters, the strangers, the fear, they had all led to this moment. And now, she had to face the truth. The horse was not of this world. The scars on its body, the way it moved, the way it had healed her, if only for a moment, it all pointed to something greater. And yet, it had stayed. It had fought for her. It had chosen her. But now, it had to make the ultimate choice. The final confrontation. The ground trembled. The girl felt it before she saw it, a deep, unnatural rumble beneath them. The trees shook, their leaves scattering like frightened birds. Then, the light appeared. A glowing blue sphere rose in the distance, illuminating the night like a second moon. The girl's breath hitched as she recognized it. The thing they had feared. The thing that had been searching for the horse all along. It wasn't just the villagers hunting them. Something else was coming. The horse stopped at the edge of the valley. Its body was still, tense, as if it already knew what was about to happen. The girl swallowed hard. "What is it?" she whispered. But she already knew. This was a recall. A summoning. The horse had always been meant to return. A heartbreaking decision. The ground pulsed with energy, the blue light stretching out like fingers, reaching for the horse. It had to go back. The girl felt something deep in her chest, a sharp, aching pain she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about losing the horse. It was about losing the connection. The one thing that had made her feel whole again. Her hands clenched against its mane. "You don't have to leave," she choked out. "You don't have to go." The horse turned its head, its glowing eyes filled with something she couldn't explain. Then, it knelt. Her breath hitched. For the first time, the horse bowed to her. Not as an animal. Not as a beast. But as an equal. A silent goodbye. Tears burned her eyes. No, but before she could say anything more, before she could even reach out, the blue light swallowed it whole. A flash of energy. A sound like a heartbeat, loud and strong, echoing through the valley. And then, silence. The girl fell forward, the absence of the horse beneath her more painful than anything she had ever felt. Left behind, but not alone. The cold night air wrapped around her, but she barely noticed. It was gone. The horse, the creature that had saved her, changed her, fought for her, it was gone. A sob caught in her throat, but before it could escape, something strange happened. The ground beneath her shifted. Her fingers dug into the earth, and for the first time in years, she felt it. Not just with her hands. With her legs. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. It wasn't possible. She pushed forward, her body trembling, her breath shallow. The muscles in her legs responded. The horse had left. But it had left something behind. The gift. The connection. The miracle. She stared at the empty space where the horse had once stood, tears slipping down her face. It had sacrificed everything for her. And now, she could stand.